Welcome into Silver Lining Podcast. I'm Adam, of course. I'm with Uncle Rex or Grunkle Rex. Some of you like to call him. And we're here with Mike King, who we've interviewed before. We got to be on Core TV with him on his podcast, Profiling Evil. He's been a police officer, investigative person that is very knowledgeable, knows a lot about this case, Lori and Chad's case. So we're excited to sit down and just kind of chit-chat about some of the things that and Rex and I love to speculate, and sometimes we don't know the answers till we go with our gut feelings, what we think. We like to give you our opinions, which isn't, could be truth or not truth. We go with our gut feelings on things, and so this is what we're going to talk to Mike about. So sit back and let's sit back and chit-chat.
Let's clarify that, Adam. We don't intentionally lie. So could be truth or we could be wrong.
Wrong is the word. I just have a hard time saying wrong. Right.
But apparently humble enough to accept when you're off base, which is kind of what we're talking about today, is people who couldn't, and in order to continue the facade, they twist reality to fit this fantasy that they're living in. And I am so excited to talk to you fellas about this case in particular, but more importantly, because I think it's a more important issue, is this whole dynamic of coercive control and the way in which people that have seemingly normal lives can completely change and become something so deviant, or in this case, criminal, that you feel like you never even knew that individual.
That's a good description. And Mike, we're especially interested with your background and your insights. We're interested in Alex in this. And how did he get duped in? Because he was laughing at this stuff a week before he converted to it. And for them to get him, you described it so well, of people just twisting reality to cover their mistakes, their flaws. And we all do that to a little degree, but of course, this is probably the most egregious example of that. I'm talking about Lori and Chad and Alex. Most egregious example any of us have heard of, even though we all do it a little bit, how it goes that far. So you have some great insight for us we're looking forward to.
Oh, no, I'm looking forward to learning from you two and picking your brain. Let's get a little genealogy out of the way so that my listeners and maybe some of yours kind of understand the fit and where everything comes together. And maybe since you started before Adam even existed, Rex, let's start with the relationship between Adam's mother and you, and what your memories are of those early engagements with this new family that was formed that became Adam's parents.
Yeah, Janice, my sister Janice, married Adam's dad, Barry, when I was 9 years old. And we laugh about this, our family. So when I put it out there, yes, it's family dirt, but it's comedy family dirt. Very true, though. We feel they shouldn't have gotten married. Every day of their marriage, we said, when are they divorcing? And they've been together the whole time. In fact, I guess I was invited to the wedding. No one told me. I was just sitting around the house one day and everyone's running around their church clothes. I said, what's going on? I said, get dressed. We're Janice and Barry getting married. And my reaction as a 9-year-old, honest to goodness, I said, why? Are you kidding? And it went from there. I've been close to them, to the whole family, of course, being the youngest, Janice being the oldest. When Stacy, the oldest sister, was born, I was just 9 years older than her. In fact, my wife, Lisa, is the same age Stacy was. And so it wasn't a big age disparity. Then Alex came along, and Adam, and, I'd go to their Little League games or basketball games. So this isn't a distant relationship. This is a close relationship. I never try to distance myself from the fact that I'm related to Lori. We're a close family. And as a family member, but outsider, I got to see all the dynamics of the kids growing up. Even when I lived away most of the time, Adam and I both lived away once we were adults and had professional careers. So we'd come home and a lot of family activities. The family loved gathering at the Coxes because that's where the fun was. That's where the love was. And so, yes, there are, I'm sure if you looked at it from the psychologist's viewpoint, a lot of dysfunctions. Maybe there are in other families. I don't know. I only know my family and, the Coxes. So some dysfunctions, but it was certainly a wonderful place to be. Adam, you want to correct anything for the record?
It sounds great. I've told other people, people want to pull our family apart. They want to, because Lori and Alex did what they did, they want to go back and go, well, their family has just always been this. And I don't like the words always or never. Those are two words that I try not to use because those are just not true when you say somebody always does this or somebody never does this, because, there's people that, don't fall into that category. So I feel like, a lot of people, the spotlight's on our family. If the spotlight was on anybody else that's listening's family, you're going to find things that are, people can jab at. And it's really hard to see other people in other families try to take jabs at our family when they know in their family the same other things are happening in their family. So it's just hard to take sometimes, because I know I had the best childhood. I loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved my family. I loved my friends. I loved how we went on family vacations. We were open in our family, so I was able to say what I wanted to say. And my mom made us all feel loved. My dad was always at work, come home, and he was the disciplinary one. A little, timing was off a lot with my dad. But we were able to laugh. Our family laughed at everything. We just, especially if there was some kind of dysfunction, we would learn to find comedy in things. So, I know people want to say our family was this horrible family, and it really wasn't.
That's always troubled me, and I often go back to I remember sitting in the police chief's office when I was running a crime analysis unit, and the chief had just hung up from talking to the mother of a son who became drug addicted and stole a bunch of prescription medicines from other family members, and then ended up getting arrested for a violent kind of episode. And as I was listening to him finish that call, he said, you got to keep in mind that this isn't your little boy anymore. This is an adult who's making decisions, and those decisions are fueled by a drug addiction. And I think sometimes when we look at these kinds of cases, and I think I've always been fortunate to understand this as an investigator, this isn't the same person that you're trying to somehow get a background history on because of mental illness in this case, or flat out decisions that Lori and Chad and others are making, whether it's for power, sex, control, or it's mental illness. I don't even care what the reason is. The difference is they're choosing to violate criminal law. They're choosing to violate society standards. And so we have to hold them to a standard of that. So I guess with this long rant and ramble, I want to just ask both of you, have you found that families who have experienced heartache, families who have had their legs pulled out from underneath them, families that have actually stepped up and said, here are our warts, that those people are much more compassionate than others who want to sit back and judge?
Wow, I'll jump on that one right away, because Mike, in our podcast community, people have been sharing. They've been sharing their stories. It seems like, well, we have a common phrase, no one is spared. It seems like all the families have tragedy in them. We follow up the no one is spared, but we are all blessed. And in a community like that, we feel like it because we have each other in the community, and people tell their stories and other people support them. But it seems like it's everyone. I know that's like Adam saying, don't say always and never. It's not everyone, but sure is a whole lot of people whose families have a lot of heartache and trauma and tragedy. And we feel we all need to heal from it. And that's what our community has become. Our podcast community is a safe place where people can come and be heard and share, gain support, and have other people listen. So we're often in the situation when people say, well, I had tragedy in my family, nothing like yours, talking to me and Adam. And then they unfold this horrific tragedy that Adam and I can't imagine bearing, and it all looks different from a different perspective, doesn't it?
Isn't that the truth? And, Adam, I want your comments on this, but Desmond Tutu made this amazing statement about you can't choose your family. Each member is a gift from God. And sometimes you might think, well, this isn't a gift, but look at how you've been able to start to educate and maybe expose and bring out of darkness some of this wackiness that exists in some people's minds. I don't know, Adam, your thoughts on the compassion of people and the criticality of people.
Yeah, and I think that, like you said, the more that I think in life, and this is just in general, it's not just with families or whatever, I think in life, the more you experience, let's say, pain, suffering, emotional distress, like all those things, I think the more you are exposed to that or experience, it does something to your soul to where you are more compassionate for other people. You do understand more. Because, things that I have friends that really nothing really has gone really wrong in their life. And they're just kind of like, man, your life is so crazy. I just never, and I don't think everybody experiences on the level that, we've experienced. But like Rex said, I think everybody has something that has, there's something that they're struggling with, whether it's physical, mental, spiritual, family, jobs, whatever it is. I think at some point in life, people are not going to get a free ride all the way through. But the more you experience, I just feel like the people that I've been around that have had really hard things to overcome, I feel like they are more compassionate, like you said. I feel like they do see things differently than maybe somebody who hasn't experienced it.
Yeah. Well, any other thoughts on that, Rex?
I wanted to bring out, we love what you do because you are about profiling evil. That is so appropriate, but your approach to it is so realistic. Just like this example we're talking about and the example you gave about the police chief. Yes, you can look at the background, you can look at our background, and we feel that we've had wonderful lives, but then some family members choose evil. And it's not the influences they had, because the other family members had the same influences, basically. It was a choice to do evil. And that's what Adam and I have come to grips with in doing the podcast, writing the book. It's that Alex, Lori, chose to do evil. It wasn't because of their religion. They used religion as, sure, and religion does influence it. I'm not saying it doesn't, but they didn't choose evil because of their religion. They didn't choose evil because of their family upbringing. People don't choose evil because of the outside influences. Those are convenient excuses. They're just choosing to do evil like we all do like I said, to some degree, but these just went off the rail. And so your perspective, the way you treat it and talk about it, and then you dive in and talk about the evil components is very, very well received, I know. And Adam and I really appreciate your example and how you approach all of the stories that you do. You do so many. You've been doing them so well, but we appreciate that.
Oh, gosh. You guys are amazing. I want to talk about your book when we get to the end, but I wanted to share one quote from, it's an author's note from my book, Deceived, on Cold Behaviors and Dynamics, and just kind of see if it helps set this stage of what we're trying to do here. It says some stories are hard to read, let alone write, but it doesn't mean that they should not be told. And then, of course, it goes on to talk about why I, in Deceived, wrote that story and why I think you did what you did. Because, again, exposing your warts isn't like the most comfortable thing we all want to do.
Yeah. And having your whole life and families put up on a world stage like this is terrifying. Having people judge that don't know really anything, and people making comments that don't know anything, even family members that jump in and like, oh, well, I know the family, and somebody who spent three or 4 days their whole life with our family are now experts on our family. So those are difficult things to digest, or things that are said that aren't true that people pick up like, oh, they said this. Who said it? Like, obviously internet and all those things. It's just those things kind of get to me sometimes, but I guess, when your brother and sister are idiots and, believe what I believe, like, I started thinking about this analogy. So a tornado comes. So in my mind, Chad is in the center of this tornado. There's other people around this tornado that are close to getting sucked up into that whirlwind, right? Lori and Alex both got sucked up in there. Other people around are almost sucked up in it, but didn't quite get sucked up all the way like Lori and Alex did. But I feel like there's more people around that tornado that did not go up into that tornado that were real close to doing that. So, I start thinking of like, how could Lori and Alex, buy into Chad's, fiction writing, life, whatever he was coming up with. And how do you really process that and go, oh yeah, that's true, and I'm going to go through this. And so I just, it's very difficult to try to understand it because it's so crazy. There's this. She's now deceased, but this amazing cult educator. Her name was Dr. Margaret Thaler Singer, and she once made this quote. And I hope I don't massacre it, but she said, "We know that people can be led to buy almost anything." Talking about advertising, but she said, in addition to buying almost anything, people can apparently be led to believe almost anything. And cults know. I'm talking about Chad Daybell, and I think eventually Lori. Cults know that if you knew, or if these people knew from the get-go what they were in for and why, they would never join. And she closed by saying it's just as simple as that. Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, Mike, since you brought that up, if you don't mind, let us get a little bit more out of you at this point about your experience with this, because we don't know anything about cults yet. We're hearing so much the cult component of this, and we don't even know really what the definition of a cult is. Does this all fit under the definition of a cult that I'm talking about, Lori, Chad, etc.?
I think absolutely, Rex. In fact, Adam, tip your hat a little bit. Let me see what the logo is on it. What does it say?
Oh, this?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a pickleball logo from a company called Slice.
A pickleball.
So,
yes.
So
cult, yes.
Exactly, and that's what I was leading into, Rex, is that you think about it, there are tons of cults out there. When we were all younger, Amway was considered a cult. If you liked Mars candy bars, you were part of a cult. If you liked the Dallas Cowboys, that's a cult. So the difference that we try to separate out is this difference between legitimate kinds of organizations, including mainstream religions that are transparent and try to do things, and then you have these coercive control units. when I was working in the ritual crime task force, the thing that I would always teach across the state and around the United States and globally was that we have closed societies. So we can label them a devil cult or a polygamous cult or whatever, but they're closed societies where they limit the amount of information going out. They separate themselves from transparency in the world. But when you have leaders who convince the followers that they are the end all, that they are the final decision maker, that they are the one connected with whatever deity up or down or sideways that they believe in, and that they have control over things like finances, decisions that people are making, who they're going to be marrying or who they're having sex with, or where their funds are going. And usually those are all pointing back to the leaders or leader. And I believe that Lori and Chad were each individually leaders in their own wacky way. But when those two came together, and I think you said it best, Adam, on Court TV a few nights ago when we were on, this fuel and fire comes together and becomes explosive. And there are so many people that for some reason or another just want other people to make decisions for them. But if they promise them they're going to heaven or they're going to be great, or like Alex, you are the arm of God, you're doing the dirty work, but I'm getting the word from God of what you should do, and they feel this special connection, then they are unbreakable. And because they have been sucked into this little microcosm, they believe that everyone else is wrong, everyone else is against them, and that tightens that band and that bond and makes them even more dangerous.
That's a great explanation. Yeah, that's exactly what I feel like happened too.
And Mike, I know you've followed the case for some time. We have the feeling and the rumors, nothing substantiated, that it's a lot bigger than just the core people we know about. Of course, we know about Alex and Zulema and the Melanies. How far would you speculate that this particular cult, how far do you think it went? How big do you think it got? Do you think there's still people out there that are believing it?
You know, when you see, I'll just talk from an evidence-based position, which is where I like to kind of be. When you see the things that came out, like the website, and I'm not going to name the website, and people always tell me you didn't know it, and here's the name of it. But when you saw the leader of that website that was preparing people for the end of times come out and say, hey, insider information here, I've talked to Chad and I've talked to Lori, and I now get it. They're being set up by the family. They're being set up by government. It's a conspiracy against them, and I just want to let you know that everything's well. It shows me evidentiary, from an evidentiary standpoint, that their influence is exceeding beyond the nucleus of people that we're hearing about in court every day. When you hear these ghost stories, and I'll just say of the 7, for instance, and these secret societies, one thing that I always found interesting in cults that I looked into is they always left the parishioners or the followers with a belief that they had these additional connections, that they had a connection to law enforcement, and they're never going to be investigated. They're going to know if somebody tells anything of these sacred or secret things that they're doing. And so they always lay this groundwork that they have this network and fabric that's all put together. But I don't know if it's true or not, or if it's believable or not. But here's the thing that I do believe from an evidentiary standpoint is that the internet has changed the world when it comes to cult behaviors, because now you no longer have to go out and proselytize and convince people at the grocery store that you're a wacky leader. you can get on the internet and do like the three of us are doing right now and have people listen and say, that's exactly how I feel, and I'm going to align with them. And to me, that's frightening because that creates a bigger network. You know, I spoke about this concept of not being able to choose family, and it's a perfect segue to just tell a quick story. And that was, I remember when, and you two might remember, but in southern Utah, down in the Zion Park area, a group of white supremacists set up camp, and the law enforcement folks were trying to break them down. One of them was a guy named Johnny Bangeter, and he happened to be the second cousin of the governor of the state of Utah at the time. And I remember the governor getting on the radio one day and saying, you can choose a lot of things, but you can't choose family. That same quote that we've kind of been building this discussion around. But Johnny Bangeter said, I idolize Timothy McVeigh, who blew up the Oklahoma building, the Murrah Center. And he said, I met him 2 months before it happened. And so these like-minded people are going to find someone that's saying the same story. And folks, as legitimate as things like mainstream media might be on the right or the left, there are groups that align with that methodology or belief system or ideology, and those are the people that they appeal to, and their content appeals to those people. And I'm not saying one side or the other is right, kind of like NPR, because sometimes I feel like they actually report news, but it's the same concept, in my opinion, is that the network may be broader than any of us think, and why wouldn't we think so with the internet? But I'm not a conspiracy theorist either, and I never see the real core evidence to support something like that happening. I don't know. What are your thoughts on it, though?
Well, real quick before Rex goes, I gotta say this. Rex has been great at this. Rex has written a book about your conscience, and we started with this podcast. We started talking a few things, talking a little bit about following your conscience and those kinds of things. And we're very careful when Rex and I started a podcast really just to get information on what people would want in the book that we were writing about Lori's situation from our family perspective. We did 10 episodes, and we said, we're only going to do 10 episodes just to tell our story and see what you guys think and what would be good for the book. Well, then over 10 episodes, something happened during those 10 episodes where people started watching and following us and really enjoyed watching our podcast, which at the point, some people were saying that they were feeling like they were getting healed from their own trauma in their life by just listening to Rex and I talk about how Rex and I were the type of people that like to talk about things to be therapeutical for us. So as we were doing that, people started identifying with that and liking that. So then people started, asking questions. Rex, what should I do with this? And Rex was like, look, we're not going to go down any kind of rabbit hole where we're talking about a cult, and we don't want to start another cult. So the only thing that Rex was like, look, follow your conscience. Don't listen to what I have to say. Listen to your conscience, which we were very like, we don't want to have people think that we're starting a cult, even though we had to name our group the Optimist, because people were like, well, if you have a podcast, you have people following you, you got to give them a name. We would let them name it. So Rex and I are very sketchy with the whole podcast, community anyways, because him and I don't want people to follow us thinking that we're the leaders of this group.
And
That is awesome.
we are thrilled now that the group, we feel there's a purpose to be served there. And we feel it can be a place where people come to find healing, not from me and Adam, very clearly, not from me and Adam. So we're kind of facilitating the group, but there's nothing there for following us. So, yeah, we stay pretty conscious about that. What we have to offer is a platform, and bringing good people on like you and getting different perspectives and identifying people where people can go to get healing. And it's never from us.
Yeah. Well, thank goodness. I mean, you think about the wackiness of the Frankie Hildebrand case and others. again, you talk about the focus of a cult, and it directs people back to a leader. And I love the fact that you two are saying we're not the answer. We might facilitate and help you and point you toward people that are experts in these areas. And I feel the same way. I feel like I'm this journeyman that's trying to figure it out myself. But I love being able to lean on people like Dr. Yanya Lalick or Margaret Thaler Singer or Rick Ross. And I'm grateful for my association with them because I can bounce ideas off them. I do know a little bit about law enforcement and cults and those kinds of things, and I feel comfortable in talking about those. But it is a really slippery slope when people start to get someone who listens to them, because they might believe the hype and think somebody really does think I'm smart.
Well, I'm going to vote for Rex as our leader, so the rest can take all of them.
Yeah, we all leadership.
Yeah, so Rex and I feel like you said, besides Lori and Alex and Zulema and Melanie's and what role they played, what they knew, what they didn't know, we know now that all of them are backing off of what I think they were going towards that tornado. And when they found the kids, I think then they started backing off. And Rex and I were thinking of that, with the killings, would this classify as something where it was just Alex, or was it Alex and Chad? Do you think Lori was ever at any of the killings? Do you think that there were more people who witnessed the killings, or how do you feel? These are all speculations. I know we don't know.
Yeah, I'm like you. I don't know, and I find myself theorizing based on limited amounts of information, which is always kind of dangerous. But it goes back to discussions that I've had, even that I've mentioned on Court TV with the two of you on, or with others, where I've said I'd really like to know the details in a Melanie Gibb immunity agreement. What may she have known? What should she have known? Because you're sucked into this thing. And, when you start talking about things like, I think it's this, again, boiling pot of a bunch of wacky minds, but you got Chad Daybell, if every report we're hearing is accurate, coming up and saying, hey, this person's dark. And then you got Lori assigning Zulema and Melanie and others to have a casting party and, pray and try to get their spirit casted out, knowing that if Chad's right and they're dark, and Chad's right that once the dark spirit is exorcised from the body, that the body's going to naturally die, shouldn't that tell a reasonable person, wait a minute, there's something wrong here? I don't know. And I'm going to pause right there and just see what your thoughts are.
I have a thought on that, because I was thinking this through. Something Adam and I have noticed is that timetable, everything gets so compressed because for the trial, et cetera, like Lori's life, people want to know her background. Well, over 50 years, people came on different podcasts and said, well, I saw this one experience that comprised 5 minutes of her 50-year life. And people take it and run and draw conclusions from that like crazy. And that's the danger we have, is where the time frame is a little bit tough to follow. But when Lori, when they talk about, and I thought the prosecutor just did a fantastic job in questioning Melanie Gibb of saying, okay, but if the spirit is cast out, what happens to the body, and bringing that all together. Yeah. And like Melanie Gibb said, we didn't think of that because Chad that wasn't part of the original crap that Chad made us up. You get the light thing and dark thing going. And then as he looked around and saw other weak minds that needed to get on board, like maybe Alex, hey, we can use this and turn him, and he can be our hitman. What will it take? And I'm, of course, wildly speculating here. But what will it take to get him so fired up that he'll actually do our dirty work and kill the children? and then I believe came up with the that zombie, that dark spirit has to be taken out, and so the body will die, or the body needs to die, so the zombie, he made that up to fire up a situation. So when the people got started, that may not even have been part of the whole explanation or the whole tragic game they were playing. And then Chad, Lori, whatever combination, made stuff up as they went to add to it to fit their purpose at the time. So I don't think when Chad came out with Light and Dark, there was the whole theory of, okay, let's cast him out and then the body's going to die. That came on later when they needed it to serve their purpose. They just added more crap to the crap and just grew a bigger pot, was my thought.
And Adam, I want your comment, but that's the coolest part about Revelation, Rex, is that you can fix all of the deficiencies in your belief system by a new revelation.
Exactly.
And I don't want to say that in a way that is attacking to mainstream faith traditions that talk about revelation or other things, because I think, this is completely different. This is some mundane guy who found a way to become important in a few people's lives. And everything was dark and secret and held behind the curtain instead of transparent and revelatory in nature. I don't know, Adam.
I keep going back to, light and dark spirits and zombies, and going back to you have the power, Zulema, to change weather. Like, if somebody's telling you that, and that you go outside and you do something and you can't make it windy, you can't stop the wind, but Lori and Chad are telling you that you can. So then you start telling people, oh, I have the power to change weather, or whatever the powers that Lori and Chad gave all these people, and they go outside and they try it and it doesn't work. Why are they still, going along with the craziness? And then Lori and Chad in their portals in the shower or in their closet. Oh, I just can't wrap my mind around how you play house and really believe it. Or I just can't even go there, how all these people just, and then Alex thinking that, Chad put his hands on his head and gave him a blessing that, hey, you were the same angel that, stopped Nephi from being killed from his brothers Laman and Lemuel in the Book of Mormon. You're saying reincarnation is a thing, is that in the church, there's no such thing as reincarnation. So how is it now reincarnated? How is this actually part of the thing? So like Rex said, when you start, coming up with something, it contradicted everything, at least as far as the church goes, or as far as the gospel goes, just regular Christian beliefs.
Yeah, it was really interesting to me because it's a repetitive process that I've seen in other cults, is that, again, make the person feel like they are special, that because they are aligned with you, you can reveal how great they are, and you take somebody who might be having an otherwise mundane life. And I don't know how much Alex struggled. I mean, you've left word about, I was really touched actually last night when you talked about the fact that Alex pursued comedy, and sometimes comedy is a way to expose these deep angsts that we feel inside of us. But I know that he was sucked in and pulled into this belief that he was somebody really special and that he had a special responsibility. But here's the thing that always bugged me from a criminal standpoint, and that was, if they truly believed they were ridding the world of zombies, wouldn't they have been on a rooftop screaming at the top of their lungs, I killed another zombie last night. We're a whole batch safer, everybody, because now Charles Vallow's gone. Tammy Daybell's gone. Lil JJ's gone. Ty Lee are gone. Maybe even going back earlier and I want to talk about this, but maybe even a Joe Ryan's gone. And eventually an Alex is gone. Wouldn't you be screaming from the rooftops, you're a whole bunch safer because I'm here holding on to things and keeping control of the dark secrets of the world.
Right.
And along with that, if you really believed it, wouldn't you use it in your defense in court? I didn't kill Charles. I killed the zombie. Charles was already gone from that.
Yeah, I killed Ned, or I had Alex kill Ned, or whatever it was. Yeah.
If you really believed it, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you tell the story? Why wouldn't Lori in her, I don't even have the words for it, but her statement she made in the sentencing, why wouldn't she stick with those stories instead of making up all new, completely offensive? Sorry, y'all have words. Instead of making up new stuff.
So going back to Joe Ryan, Rex and I have done a few podcasts about this. I don't know if we talked about this in the book or not. I can't remember. But, when Joe died, that was before Lori even met Shad. But Lori was on a path of predicting the end of the world at that point. Those kinds of things where she started to listen to Julie Rowe, who was another one that, Mike Stroud and Julie Rowe and all these podcasts that Lori got Alex to listen to. But going back to Joe, I still think in my mind, I'm about 50-50 because I know Joe did have a heart issue and he had a heart thing in his room. He could have had a heart attack. So I'm 50% that, but I'm also 50% that Lori and Alex somehow got into that apartment, gave him poison or whatever and killed him. So I'm 50-50 on that. But even if either one of those scenarios go down, Lori probably has been praying for Joe to die because of supposedly he molested Colby and Tylee, right? So with that whole thing and got Alex on board with that whole thing, that then Lori goes to Alex, look, we either killed Joe because God let us do that. He let us in the apartment. He let just kind of like, when Nephi in the Book of Mormon was led. So in her mind, she's putting things in her mind that are part Book of Mormon, part Bible, stories, and trying to relate it to her own situation with God. Because, of course, Lori wanted to be somebody special. We all know that. So with that being said, if Lori said, all right, well, look, God took Joe, gave him the heart attack or whatever, that fueled her fire and fueled the whole thing going forward. Or they killed him and got away with it, fueled the fire. Then when they killed Charles and got away with it, they're probably like, God is on our side. I told you, Alex, we're doing the work God wants us to do because we're doing things and God is opening doors for us to get us out of the situations. Kind of like in Nephi's situation or other members of the Bible where you see miraculous things happen in stories where somebody gets killed or something like that in the Lord. So with all that being said, I think the mindset starts going in that direction. And so that's when, after that happened, then it started going with anything else could happen. Tammy and the kids and trying to kill Brandon, which is a whole other story. But I feel like that the Joe thing started it one way or another, whether they killed him or he died of a heart attack. Either way, mindset for Lori, that started going in that direction.
Yeah, so do you want my assessment on how things unfolded? And this is only my theory, and I always say it on my channel. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, when he was writing the Sherlock Holmes books, he had this really famous quote that I keep reminding myself of when I want to pontificate. So I'm going to tell myself this before I come out with my theory. But he said, speaking for Sherlock Holmes, he said, it is a capital mistake to theorize before one has facts, because insensibly we spend all of our time twisting the facts to fit our theory rather than allowing the facts to come out to produce what the theory is or the result is. And so I remind myself of that often, but I think back and I don't know that it really, at this point, matters if Joe Ryan was murdered. And I don't say that, and I hope if Annie's listening, she doesn't take that wrong. But but I look at it as what I call a precipitating event, that there was a reward system that came with Joe Ryan's death. And that reward was, it may have solved things she complained about in talks where she talked about the abuse of her children or her own abuses, whether they were emotional or physical or whatever else. I have no idea. I've not looked at it deeply enough. But there was a reward package that came with Joe Ryan's death, and that was a financial reward package. Then as things started tightening up and as she starts aligning with Chad Daybell, there may be a triggering moment where she says, hey, there's a reward package. And even if that reward package is assigned to JJ and Ty Lee, I am still the one in charge of that reward package. And so there's motive for murder because of that reward package. Because I don't know that Lori or Chad or anyone else specifically wanted to kill for the lust of blood as much as it satisfied a need that they had. And so there was that reward package. Then with JJ and Ty Lee, whether influenced by Chad or I'm getting kind of tired of being the one carrying the load, and now the money's been stripped away from me from Charles, so I can't control that money, but I can control the Social Security and the money that's coming in through the children. And if I alleviate the expenditure, and I hope this is not too brutal to look at it as from a business standpoint, but if I can alleviate the expenditure of what I would have to pay for these children and yet keep it quiet and keep it hidden, I still have the income coming in that I can continue to do the things I want to do, which is live lavishly in a hotel and tour Hawaii and flaunt on the beach and do all these other things. And so I wonder then if it was necessary to bring together the wackiness of, we got to come up with a revelation that justifies all this, because we got to face God someday for committing murders. And we got to come up with something that says, no, this is a higher law that we're participating in. So that's my whacked out theory based on how it might have all started to unfold and evolve. But the bottom line is, and like I always say, don't worry about all the voodoo and all of the conspiracy theories. Just focus on the fact that the elements of murder were satisfied. These two, probably and most likely with Alex, those three, backed up by a whole batch of wacky people that were praying and hoping and getting rid of zombies and everything else. They violated the rights of those children. They violated the rights of Tammy and Charles, potentially Joe, but they committed criminal events and they should face the penalty for those. And then when we get to sentencing and try to decide whether you put these people away for life or, in Jad's case, to death, then bring in all this wackiness.
We are of like minds with that. Certainly. Yeah. As long as we're naming people, let's not forget Chad's neighbor who died under suspicious circumstances.
The old guy, yeah. I mean, why has that not been dug further into? And I wonder if the state will say we've gotten our pound of flesh, Arizona will say we got our pound of flesh, and they'll forget about the involvement of all these other people that were in some way conspirators to this entire event.
Yeah. So the whole thing with Chad's neighbor, for those of you who don't know, and I didn't know this until we recently found out that, Chad's neighbor ended up dying, older guy, so it could have been anything, but suspiciously died, maybe with the same kind of thing. And maybe he saw Chad in the backyard or saw something that he shouldn't have saw. And the conspiracy is that Chad, somehow killed him, right? I mean, that's the gist of it, or is there more to it, Rex, that you remember?
Yeah, because the neighbor saw something, and there's a whole. I think Lauren Matthias, Hidden True Crime, has a couple of interviews on this and shows on this that lay out the possibility, right? And boy, it sure makes sense. Yeah. Like all of these, how many coincidences can you have, with this?
Oh, just red flags everywhere in this.
I always say I love a circumstantial criminal case, and I would rather walk in with a circumstantial case than here's my dead body and somebody witnessed it, because that circumstantial case says, what kind of human being could say all of these things just happen to happen, that they just happen to be right where Alex Cox's or Chad Daybell's phone was or anything else. But anyway, so I got 2 videos. I'm not going to play the videos, but I know you'll know them. But I want to ask your thoughts on 2 things that always troubled me over the case. Shortly after the children disappeared, we learned that they had been to Yellowstone Park. And I actually had one of my subscribers reach out to me and say, I have reviewed 11 hours worth of video from Yellowstone National Park, and I think I found Lori, Alex, JJ, and Tylee walking along near in some areas. And they sent me the video, and it was the kids and mom and then Alex at the park. And the thing that I found so interesting is that every time they got near where there was an edge near the hot pots, Mom and Alex would separate themselves and leave Tylee basically in charge of making sure that JJ didn't tumble over the edge and into those hot pots. And I always wondered how close that was in proximity to the disappearance of the children, if that may not have been one of 2 things. Number one, staging to say, look what a loving family we are because we're going to Yellowstone and we're showing the kids around and having a great time together. Or number 2, hoping that this God they believed in would somehow cause those 2 little tykes to tumble into the hot pots. What are your thoughts?
Hadn't heard that theory, but that is, of course, the day Tylee died later that night. And so I think that at least the thinking was there for that. And in this case, Mike, and I'm sure you're very well versed at this, I stopped saying, and Adam stopped saying, no, it couldn't be that. I think anything is possible. And that was a common theory that I bought into, is that, or they were going to push him in, in one that was poorly attended, and maybe it was well attended that day, and they were going to get rid of them that way. So I think that's as feasible as any other theory we've heard. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I know. I literally thought when I heard that the kids were missing and that they went to Yellowstone Park and they were around those geysers or whatever, I really thought that they pushed the kids in and we'll never be able to find the bodies, and there's not going to be, I don't know where they are. They're not going to be buried in Chad's backyard. So I feel like that was their first plan. Somehow, some way, whether if there wasn't anybody around, or, oh, do you know how crazy JJ is? And then Tylee jumped in after him, or whatever they could have possibly tried to say. I really thought that was their first plan. And when that didn't work, then they ended up killing Tylee that night. But I really do think that was it. And in some ways, I was like, if the bodies were never going to be found, in Tylee and JJ, or if they, would they walk away, or would they call 911 and say, my kids just fell in? Like, what would be the out for that? Because at some point, people are going to want to see Tylee and JJ.
I think they would have absolutely called 911 and said, I'm a grieving parent. I'm distraught. Look what happened.
Yeah. So there's that theory. But then the other theory that I have with Lori and the whole thing of like, how could you kill the kids knowing that everybody's going to want to see them? And were you going to say they're with Melanie Gibb all the time? Oh, well, JJ's here and Tylee's here. Okay, well, I want to talk to him. Okay, well, when I see him next, I will. Then she doesn't answer her phone. She started going on that whole thing where, did she really think that we weren't going to, find out that Tylee and JJ weren't around? Like, or did she really believe that the end of the world was coming and she wouldn't have to worry about that? Those are my 2 big thoughts of like, you can't just like think, well, I'm going to kill the kids. We're going to kill the kids. and then nobody's ever going to ask to see the kids because the end of the world's come. Because the end of the world's coming. Chad said it's going to be on this day or it's going to be this day. So we'll never have to even worry about that. And I really believe, I believe that was part of their plan.
Jeez. I'm going to play the video for you. Okay. Just, you've never seen it, I take it.
Right. I've seen pictures, but yeah, not the video.
So yeah, I mean, I was just shocked that, and of course we sent this on to the police department and the investigators, and never heard a thing. So I don't know if they used it, but at this point, I haven't seen it come out. So I'm finally willing to share this publicly. But yeah, kind of interesting, isn't it? Yeah. And what would have
there was a lot of people there then, huh?
Yeah. What would have happened if they were alone versus
right? That's the thing. Maybe we can find a geyser that's by itself. Maybe that was the strategy or the plan or whatever.
Yeah.
It's so hard to dissect of what really was in their mind. And, all of us would really like to know what was like the plan. But unfortunately, everything happened, and, whether it was plan A, plan B, or plan C.
The thing that's interesting to me is that if you watch this, and I'm going to just take this back just a hair, is that Tylee is the one who stays back and is ensuring that JJ is safe. Mm-hmm. Lori and Alex are way up ahead doing their own thing. Again, not the normal behavior you'd see in a parent who is hovering over their kids, making sure they don't do something goofy.
Right.
So I'll stop that. So then the other one that I wanted to just ask you about, because it impacted me deeply, but one of the things I learned when I was going through this process of becoming attuned to the profiling process, often a profiler only sees a criminal case after it's over. So you don't go in and smell the iron in the air from blood that's been spilled or other kinds of things like you would on a homicide that you're handling yourself. When you're profiling, it's more about what isn't being said in the photographs that you're looking at. And as I watched the video of the officer going through when Charles Vallow was murdered, and the officer was walking through the house, and I think you can envision this in your minds because I know you've seen those videos. But as he walks past Charles' body, checks and confirms that Charles is deceased, he then walks through the left entry into the dining room and kitchen. Do you remember that part? Mm-hmm. And he makes that little round around the kitchen and comes out into the hallway by the refrigerator and starts down the hallway. But as he's walking through the kitchen on the counter, JJ was how old at the time? Was he 7 or?
I think so. Yeah.
He was like just barely under 8 when he died, right? But I remember on the kitchen counter was a Buzz Lightyear sitting on there. And it just was so impactful to me of the innocence of that little JJ, regardless of whether he had issues or not, regardless of whether he was a tyrant at times, that he was this little boy trapped inside of a maturing body. And that really impacted me. And I'm going to pause there for a second, just get your thoughts, and then I'm going to share something else that maybe nobody ever picked up on.
Yeah, JJ is such a, like I've mentioned this before, but with JJ, he came a long way with the autism that he's had, and Lori did a fantastic job with him. And I know people don't want to hear anything good about Lori, and I understand that, but she did a lot for JJ, a lot, when he was growing up, and just to, to know that you can get caught up in something where you can, be involved in killing a kid is just, it's just beside me. And so, yeah, I mourn for Tylee and JJ. I wear this bracelet on my wrist every single day, and I think about them a lot. So, yeah, And the other thing too that you were mentioning, and I'll let Rex say, is like I noticed some things in the footage when they were walking through with Charles with his slippers were off, and I'll talk about that later, or his sandals were off. But go ahead, Rex.
I'm just, that's fact. I don't think we can talk about JJ and Tylee enough, because that is what has galvanized the whole world that listens about this and puts the spotlight on it so justice can be served. You know, early on, before the media was involved, before talking about it, Brandon and the people close to him tell this story the best of how terrifying it was to be alive, because anything could happen at any time. And it really impressed me that the people Brandon worked for were afraid to come to work because after he had been shot at, because someone was after him, they could come to work and start shooting up at work. And so it affected so many people until the media got involved, and then law enforcement got more involved, and that took the pressure off. So going back to the point, we can't talk about it enough, how just what you're saying, how innocent JJ was and how young these people were, and what a tragedy this was, because that's what keeps us all united and keeps all the energy on let's get justice for these victims. Chad, Lori, Alex is facing ultimate justice. He may have got the easy way out here in this life, but Chad, Lori, and anyone who conspired in this, let's get justice for these people. Not just, like you said, the state will say, we got our pound of flesh. Let's not worry about the other people. Let's go find them all. Make sure everyone gets justice for this. That's why it's so important to remember Tylee and JJ, or just one reason, of course, because the loss is so just so compelling to all of us. Everyone in the world, people that didn't even know they existed, are now so emotionally involved, and they're putting life's energy into getting them justice. We love that.
That's awesome. Tell me about the slippers, Adam.
Well, when Charles was shot, and you'll notice he was wearing not slippers, but sandals, that, when Alex first said that he shot him in self-defense and there was a fight going on, his sandals were on his feet still. And you would think once you get into a fight and you're wearing sandals and there's, a shot and, his sandals were perfectly on his feet, which that means Alex put the slipper, like it's just the whole thing, even with that. I mean, I'm not a police officer. I watch probably way too many movies, but I was like, when I noticed that, I was like, he got shot in the chest. He could have done, I don't know what that's like to get shot in the chest. We know he executed him later by shooting him again, but I imagine that would knock you off your feet or something. If you're wearing slippers, one falls off or something. I see the movies all the time when they find one shoe over here and this, but so that caught my eye. That was like, he's laying there, perfectly still with his slippers, sandals on. I was like, that was odd to me.
Yeah, that really is an interesting question, isn't it? And so the question becomes, was there staging, putting the slippers back on, or was it just an absolute ambush and he dropped like a ton of bricks? Our time is up and we got to do this again, but I wanted to share as we finish that walk through Charles's house, something that really impacted me. That was, if you go back and watch the video, in one of the bedrooms is a small, I don't know how small, but a small green bucket that had clothing and things in it. And I've always wondered if those were Tylee's items and if it was the same bucket that child was buried in.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't heard or noticed that.
Well, obviously they must have taken that with them and put it in the storage unit, the famous storage unit thing where you saw Alex go in and get all that stuff. I'm sure they kept all that stuff. So it's definitely a possibility.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It'd be interesting if it's the same one. And then because I looked at behavior much of my career, then you wonder about the behavior, and is that something tied to emotionally show I'm putting you here where you were always kept or something,
Yeah.
And so you really try to think about this. And like we talked about last night on Court TV, I believe very strongly that we saw a progression of confidence in the progression of murders that occurred. And who knows what would have been next. And I always wonder, if Lori's truly the mastermind, wouldn't you feel awful uncomfortable if you were Chad? And if he's the real mastermind, how did it go back and impact clear all the way back to Joe Ryan?
Well, as Rex would say, there are no masterminds in this.
Yeah.
These were not smart criminals. But Adam was on the list. So I don't know if he would have been literally the next, but Lori made it clear that she told Alex in a text that Adam was a zombie now. So that put Adam on the list.
Wow.
Adam lived in fear for how long?
Long time. Like we would go to bed. I bought a gun. I've never had a gun before, but I bought a gun. So I had a gun. I went to bed, I timed my family, locked the house, shut all the windows, not knowing if Alex was going to come kill us. So I was like, well, why would he kill us? Like, they can't get any money from us. Cause then the whole thing with Lori not getting Chad's $1 million, I was like, if they kill us, they don't get anything. There's no money involved in it. Why would they do it? So a lot of things started going through my mind. But at one point I told Rex, I was like, I don't know if Alex could look at me face to face and just shoot and kill me. But then again, if he did what he did before, and then, he was in a different mood. Yeah. So anyways, yeah, those are all the terrorizing things that we live with.
Well, I'm so sorry that you have had to experience this and that your family has had to experience it. And like that quote early on, some stories need to be told, and you've told that story in a number of ways. You continue with Silver Linings podcast, but you also have your book, Lori's Lies and Family Ties. And I don't know what that process was like for the two of you to write that together. I'd like to put links down below, and we got to do a book swap. I clearly can agree that we have to do that. But tell us a little bit about the book and where people can find you, and then let's just commit to doing this again.
Yes, let's definitely do it again. There's a lot still unanswered that where we can pick your brain for that. And I'm looking forward. I'm on the road now, like you can see from behind me. I'm in a hotel, but I get home Sunday. I expect your book that I ordered, Mike, to be there for me. So,
you shouldn't have ordered it. I'd have sent it to you.
Well, I'll take it.
I got a sense that Adam's a little tighter than you, so I'll mail you one, Adam. You'll just have to save
you. Yes, you got that right. Yes.
Very good. But writing the book, Adam touched on when we started it and why we did the podcast. But Adam was already writing, and I had just released my book before I went to the trial and got caught up in all this. And I said, there's similar components here. Why don't we put them together and get something published here? Because one of my problems is writing a book can take forever, and so I thought, well, collaborating, there's a story. I think people would be interested in in a family perspective. We don't pretend to speak for the family. There is no one in our families, extended or otherwise, I think, that speaks for everyone, because there's so many different divisions or perspectives in our family. But it is a family perspective. So we got together and got it out there. Adam, what was your experience in writing? Very healing experience for me.
Yeah, I started writing just all my feelings and thoughts throughout the last 4 years, because I knew if I didn't write it down that I would forget some of them. So somebody had told me to do that, and I did it. And so, writing is definitely it's a therapy for me to get it out, everything out. But also it's very difficult too. Sometimes as I was writing, I was like bawling my head off. And so while it's doing that, I guess some people who read the book felt what I was writing were crying during the book too. So I think it can be powerful. I wrote it because I wanted to help other families communicate better, because what happened to our family was lack of communication or lack of asking questions or investigating or assuming. I want to get rid of all that with families and get everything out in the open so families can talk about anything that sounds fishy or weird. Don't take somebody's word for it. Just, dive into it. Find out more about it before you make any decisions. So that was the main reason.
We are so grateful to be here with Mike, such a professional and such just a good person. This adds so much to our community in Silver Linings Podcast, and so we're glad to collaborate like this and to have your background and wisdom. So, of course, we want to do more with you and find out more. We'll have a lot more questions, especially as the trial develops and more stuff keeps coming out. But it's just a pleasure to work with such a good person. Adam, anything you want to add?
Yeah, Mike, appreciate you. We'll see you. We'll probably do more on Court TV, talking with you. We like learning from you. And our audience, obviously, is very interested in learning and wildly speculating. We love to wildly speculate just because we just don't know. And nothing is going to surprise us. So until next time, we'll talk to you later on Silver Lining Podcasts.